So welcome. My name is Mario Sanchez. I run training here at Sumo Logic, and today I'm going to walk you through the first level of training and certification, which is just becoming a Sumo Pro user. And in short, what we're going to be covering is 5 points. First is, how does Sumo Logic help me? So for those of you who are brand spanking new to Sumo, I'm going to be showing you a demo. I'm going to start you with the 30,000-foot view of what can Sumo do for me? And of course, I'm going to be using some dashboards. I'm going to be using some alerts so that you can see what a normal flow looks once you have Sumo up and running for yourself. And then I'm going to take a step back and assume that you're brand spanking new to Sumo. You've just been given an account, but you don't know what data is available to you. So how do you go and find out, one, what's available? How do you start analyzing? How do you start searching that data, parsing it? And eventually, we're going to move into number 4, which is, how do I monitor my trends? How do I keep an eye on those critical events that I want to see? And I can do this through dashboards and alerts. And last but not least, we're going to move into setting you up for certification, and then what else is available for you from there. So as you've noted, you're all muted, and there's a reason for that. That's just to avoid distractions. But if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Now, we normally run this session, this tutorial that we're running, or this webinar that we're running today, we also run it face-to-face, and we pair this up with some hands-on labs. So you'll be wondering right now, how do you go about doing those hands-on labs? These will be labs that you can tackle on your own, but let me show you where you can find these. I'm going to go to an instance. Sorry, let me just go here to an instance and show you that from in your own environment. Now, when you take your certification, you actually want to make sure that you get the credit for it. So you want to go in your own environment. You want to go to this certification tab, and in here, you'll see that, for example, today, we're covering this level 1, so I'm actually running this QuickStart webinar right now. But here's a tutorial that you can take, and if you click on this tutorial, it actually takes you to this tutorial that you can run alongside this webinar, or later on, not alongside, but later on. By the way, this same tutorial is also linked here from this Learn tab. If you click on the Learn tab, you'll notice that there's a tutorial called Using Sumo Logic, and there's 7 parts to it. You'll notice in my slides, there's breaks for when you can try these out. Of course, we're not going to be doing them live, but you have the ability to do so later on. Okay, so with that said, that's how you go about using the tutorial. You can use a training environment. If you start doing the tutorial, you'll see that there's a login and all that good stuff there for you. And post this webinar, if you have any questions, you have the ability to join us in community. If you go to community.sumologic.com, it's a forums. You can post questions. You can review questions that have been asked before, or you can also join us on Slack as well. All right, so this is preparing you for this level 1 certification exam. It's online. It's 30 multiple choice questions. It's 60-minute time limit. Most people finish it in about 30 to 35 minutes. It's actually fairly easy. If you've gone through this webinar, if you try the labs, it's actually, the answers are a part of these same labs. And you've got 3 attempts. Most people pass it on the first attempt. A few pass it on the second. No one has ever come back to say, hey, I didn't pass it in my 3 attempts. What do I do? All right, so let's get into it. How does Sumo Logic help me? What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through first this data flow. So the way that data comes into Sumo is through this area that we call data collection. We're not going to be spending any time there. There's a future webinar for that called Setting Up Sumo Logic. That's about setting up your collectors, setting up your sources. Today, we're going to assume that that data is already in Sumo, and we actually are going to focus on number 2 and number 3, which is, how do I start searching that data? How do I start analyzing that data? So we're going to use some operators to show you how to search and analyze that data. And once we have that data analyzed in a way that we want, we're going to learn how to build alerts. We're going to learn how to build dashboards so we can start visualizing and monitoring that data. So we're going to be focusing mostly on number 2 and number 3. But before we do that, I'm going to start you with a demo. I'm going to start you with a monitoring and troubleshooting demo that gives you a good sense of how someone would use Sumo. And I'm going to break this demo into kind of 3 stages. The first one is, you receive some sort of an alert that is notifying you of a critical event. And Sumo has the capability of just sending an email alert, which is the easiest. or perhaps you want to create a webhook to PagerDuty or to HipChat or Slack or whatever tool you're using in-house. So you receive an alert, or in our case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at some of our dashboards and start seeing some reds and realize that something is going on. And then you're going to start investigating. And what you normally do, and I'm probably speaking for most of you here, is you start looking at your metrics, because the metrics help you identify the what is going on in your environment. You still don't know why something is happening, but you get a pretty good idea of what the symptoms are. So you look at your metrics, and then from your metrics, you pivot to your relevant logs. You start identifying the why something is happening. We all know logs have actually answers. They're very verbose, and they can tell us exactly what is going on. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over here and show you a fake company called Travelodge that we've built. And like most of you out there, Travelodge is a modern app, like many of the ones that you have that you're supporting. And as a modern app, it's built on microservices. It's got Kubernetes. It's got all the. As a matter of fact, this one happens to be an AWS shop. So we're using RDS. We're using ELB. We're using all the stuff that you normally would expect in a modern app, right? And Travelodge allows me to do things like book flights from, in this case, San Francisco to, say, LAX, right? And I can search for flights and, you know, the normal stuff. I can search for inbound and outbound. I can say purchase, and I go enter all my information and pay. So let's say that this is my modern app. I can book hotels. I can book a car. I can go to my cart, see what's in there, and all that good stuff. All right. So if I am in charge of supporting, if I'm in charge of ops for Travelodge, or even DevOps for Travelodge, I might have some dashboards that look something like this. So let me show you a breadth of these, and then I'm going to dive into the demo. But here's an example of a business overview. These could be dashboards that are being shared with our business analysts. So they can see the status of our payment service. They can see the status of our app. They can see the status of our website. They even get to see locations where the flights, hotels, and car bookings are coming from, right? So they can see where the biggest customers happen to be. I can even, I'm showing them here outliers on flight and hotel and car bookings. So for example, this might start showing them trends over a certain period of times. So I can see that at 7 a.m. I had a dip in flight bookings, maybe because nobody's booking at 7 a.m. just yet. Same story with car hire. So in short, I have here a dashboard that our business analysts might be interested in. I see hourly bookings. I see trends over time. I actually see here a breakdown of flight, hotel, and car, and it looks like most people are picking up cars through my site at this moment, right? Or at least for the last 60 minutes, as it reads here. So here's a dashboard that I might share with my business analyst. Perhaps I have a security team, and that the security engineers want to keep an eye on this kind of stuff. Here's a dashboard that I could share with that security team. This is showing me SSOs into our environment. This is showing some threat intel through Okta. This is showing some suspicious logging distances. So it shows me here that Damon logged in from 2 different IP addresses. One is in the United States and one is in Egypt, right? So there's a distance of about 10,000 miles that clearly almost impossible for this person to be able to be logging in from those different places in a short period of time. So maybe this is something that I want to go and tackle a little more. I'm seeing data exfiltration here, data that is leaving in some peaks. So as you can imagine, I'm not going to dive into this, but you're noticing here a dashboard that I've put together for my security team for them to be able to keep an eye on what's going on in our environment, what data is leaving or coming into our environment, integrity, and so on. By the way, I'm going to talk about apps later on, and apps are just out-of-the-box content that we've created in Sumo that we assume you're going to need. A lot of these dashboards that I'm showing you are using these apps. I didn't build this from scratch. I actually used dashboards that Sumo has out of the box. Okay, let me close a few of these. I'm going to close that security one. I'm going to close this business overview one. Let's take a look at this one, the operational overview. So I was mentioning before that I'm the ops guy at Travelodge, And I might want to have a dashboard like this one. And by the way, notice that I even have a over here in a Slack that is going to Travel Ops. So if I had my Slack open, I probably would have already gotten an alert, because it's looking like I'm having some issues, at least here with my checkout service, with my ELB. I'm having a lot of 500 errors. So you notice what this is showing you is it's a big picture of everything that is going on in your environment. Remember, I was talking about Travelodge being a modern app, like any of your modern apps, that has a lot of microservices, a lot of pieces of moving parts. So what I've done here is I've put together a dashboard showing me a status for each one of those pieces. So I can see my VPC network rejects, I can see my product service, my database issue. In this case, since this is an AWS shop, this is my RDS. Here's my payment service. Most of the stuff on a normal day would look all green. But unfortunately, some stuff is happening. I have some reds. So I've set up my dashboard so that if I click, say I'm going to click here on checkout service. If I click on checkout service, it's taking me to a new dashboard that is called services details, that is going to show me even more information about what's going on here with my environment. So remember how I told you, let me just backtrack here a little bit. I went from identifying an alert, so something is going on in my environment, to now dive and start finding out through metrics what is going on. So let me show you metrics, and then I'm going to show you how I can dive into relevant logs. So here is my dashboard. I can see clearly here in the top left-hand side. Let me show you this one. I'm gonna click on this icon here just to make it a little bit bigger for you. But I can see that my bookings, which are shown by this green green area, if you notice when I hover over this, it says 83, and then the metric says sum of success count. So this is the count of successful bookings that I've had over the last about 60 minutes, and it looks like everything was going fine. I had a spike around 725, and then it maintained itself that high. You know, people are just booking, and then somewhere around 802 or so, 801, it looks like I have a big dip in my bookings. Not only do I have a big dip in my bookings, but then this orange area starts appearing. And what that is, if you look at that little bubble that says 40, it says this is my failed count. So this is the count of failed bookings that I've had. So something's going on in my environment. I have a drop in my successful bookings. I have an increase in my failed bookings, and clearly there's something going on. This is a perfect example of using metrics to identify the what is going on. Now I have a clear picture that I'm having issues with my bookings. I don't know why. I still don't know why, and logs are going to help me identify that. But I have a good sense of the symptoms that are going on. So let me close this, and just for completeness, let me show you a few of these other panels that are in here. This one's actually a pretty interesting one. Errors in the last 7 days. What this is showing me is a trend of the last 7 days between this same time period. So let's say 720 all the way through 830. By the way, I'm East Coast based, so that's why you're East Coast US. So that's why you're seeing this particular time frame. But if you see, this is happening around 720. In the last 7 days, and that's what this is showing you. It's showing that right now, these are the number of errors that I've had in the since starting 8 a.m. But yesterday, which is shown by errors minus 1D, that was flat. And the day before, errors minus 2D, and errors minus 3D, and so on and so forth, are showing me that there were no errors at the same time. This is actually good, because if I saw that at 7:45 every day I had a spike in errors, that could tell me that I probably have some automated process that is kicking off and it's creating all these errors. But in this case, it seems like an isolated situation. Everything in the previous days was fine, but today I'm seeing a spike in these errors. Again, I still don't know what the errors are, but I'm getting a good sense that something happened around 8 a.m. Let's take a look at this one here on the right-hand side. This one is showing me that my gateway latency average was normal, normal, normal. And then again around 8 a.m., I have this pink triangles identifying outliers. And it looks like I had a spike in my gateway latency, which is tied to this one over here, gateway latency delta. The delta between one point and the other was normal, but then again around this same time, 8:03, it looks like the gateway latency the gateway latency delta between one point and the other was pretty high, and that's shown by this outlier. Again, I'm using metrics to identify the fact that something is going on. I still don't know why. Look at this one bottom one here, errors by node. So I have a couple of nodes in here, and it looks like some of them are having, well, let's first look at these. This one is my prod01 travel worker node, and just 2 errors. Here's another one. This one's also a worker node, and it only has 2 errors. But these 2 here at the top, this one is a prod travel checkout node, and this one has 1,000 errors or 1,000 plus. And the same with this one. It's a checkout node that is having 1,000 plus errors. So with a little bit of work, with a little bit of investigation, I already know that what's having issue is my travel checkout nodes. These are the ones calling for the errors. Right, I could go in here, dive into this, and start reading through what the errors are. But before I do that, let me just show you a little bit more of what I can do. Let's look at this one over here on the top right-hand side, CPU and total memory. Look at this one. It has a big spike here as well around 8 a.m. Let me make this a little bit bigger so that we can read this. So this is showing me that this dotted line is my memory usage, as you see there. And it seems to drop and pick up normally on a regular basis. And then I have these continuous lines down here. So let's look at this green line. This is showing me my travel products, and this is showing CPU for that. This one here is showing CPU for a travel checkout node, and you get the point. But then I see this one that does a huge spike as well. Again, this is a travel checkout node. So it looks like everything was fine. And again, around 8:05, 8:02, I have a huge spike in here. And it looks like something is pretty big. Well, here's the great thing. For any of these panels, I can actually click on this little icon, and it's going to show me the detail of that data. So let's do exactly that. I'm going to click on this little icon. And what it's doing right now is it's taking me to the query behind it. That panel, that nice picture, was put together out of some query, and this is the query itself. These are the metric queries, and you can see this one's looking for CPU total, whereas this one is looking for memory. Memory seems to not be an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle it off. I'm going to click here, toggle off the memory just to make my graph a little bit cleaner. But the other thing that I see is this orange bar up here. That orange bar is actually my logs. If you notice down here at the bottom in this little red square, I'm actually able to pull some logs into my metrics world. So in this case, I'm using something called source category. Don't worry about this too much. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. But in short, what source category is just a metadata, a tag that I'm putting onto my data so that I can easily search it. And I'm saying, give me anything that has been tagged with prod01 travel start. I could have even said checkout because I know the issue is with my checkout data. But let's keep it simple. Let's just bring everything that has anything to do with travel. And not only that, but only give me those things that have the word error or exception. That's exactly what this is doing here. It's as a matter of fact, let me give you everything first. Just search for all data that has prod travel. And what you'll notice is that I've had logs all throughout. So this is showing me that I had logs, logs, logs. By the way, the lighter the square, the less messages that I've had. Look at that, that's about 1,000 messages. But the darker the square, the more messages, the denser the number of messages I've had. So in this case, that's almost 3,000 messages. But I can do this. I can say, show me only those messages that had the word error in it, or error and exception, or whatever I want to choose. I can choose some sort of a literal to be looking for. And guess what? Look at this. My CPU was doing fine until around this time in here, right? Remember this? Well, it happens to correlate with a time when I start seeing a lot of error messages in my logs. So great, I can now pivot into those logs and start finding out what the issue was. I can click on any of these squares, and what's going to happen is it's going to start showing me the errors that were showing up in there, right? So if I click on any of these squares, the bottom half just shows me those errors. And notice here, there's a first error right here, SSL routine, get certificate. So it looks like there's some sort of a certificate issue. And I can scroll down. Here's that error again, right? SSL get certificate. I can scroll down and start looking at all my messages with the word error in it. That might take a while, especially since there's a lot of little squares to go through and whatnot. So I'm going to show you a better way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift click as it's suggested there to open in search. So I'm going to do a shift click. And what that's doing now is it's taking me to the query, the actual query in the logs world behind it. And I can see all the messages. As a matter of fact, look at this, page 1 of 12. So that's around 297 messages. Oops, that's around 297 messages that I can look at. So as most of us know, whatever caused the error probably doesn't have the word error in it. So I'm going to expand my search. I'm going to search for everything, that not just those things containing the word error, but let me check for everything. And I'm going to do something even better. Instead of just looking for the last, for that particular time period, I'm going to say, let's look for the last, I don't know, 45 minutes. So I'm going to do minus 45M. This is going to search the last 45 minutes worth of data because I want to include the time period when whatever triggered the error happened, right? So notice this, I have 83,000 messages now. That's a lot of data. I have about 3,000 pages worth of messages. That's a lot of messages to scroll through, which would be pretty hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this log reduce button that you saw there. And I like to call log reduce like my easy button, because what it's doing right now is it's taking those 83,000 messages and it's starting to break them into signatures. If you notice here, what it's doing, it's saying, all right, Mario, it seems like you have about 2,000 messages or 2,600 messages that all look very similar. They look like this line in here. And of course, the source IP keeps moving as it's going through it. But my source IP might be different, right? Because I might have a different IP address or the port number might be different. Of course, the date is going to be different in all these signatures. But for the most part, the meat of the message is going to be similar. So here, it finished. And notice how it went through the 82,000 messages, 83,000 messages. But now I only have 8 pages worth of data instead of those 3,000 pages worth of data. And what it did is it went through it and it literally said, okay, you seem to have about 7,000 messages that they all have this kind of same format. Okay, the name of the level might be different, the function name might be different, perhaps the transaction ID is going to be different, but the message itself looks very similar. So I'm going to put it all together into a signature. And now you as a user have the ability to edit these signatures. For example, let me just go find something here that might make sense. Let's say that I don't care to break this message down into function name, whether it's get flights or get bookings or car bookings or get hotels. I don't care about it. So what I could do is I can edit that signature and say, you know, in the future, I don't care about the function name. Make that a variable. So that you just do that, you hit an update, and what just happened is it looked at all other messages that had that as a variable, and it collapsed those messages into one. So that's how you can edit your signature. Similarly, you can split signatures by using this little icon in here. All right, but let's continue with this. Here's that message I was seeing. Remember that SSL routines certificate verify failed? I had about 1,500 of those messages. So it's great that now I don't have to read through all of them. I already know that I had 1,500. But one of the beauties of log reduce is that I can just count on the number of messages, or I can even count on relevance of the messages themselves. Here's an interesting one. Let's just go with count. Let's see what messages only happen a few times. And I can see here some of the messages that were only happening a few times to see if it's something that is meaningful for me. Let me just go to the next one in here. Or even with relevance, I can look at messages that are relevant. Look at this one in particular. Here is one that only happened twice, and in terms of relevance, it's high, and it says Travelodge app starting cluster, something, 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 checkout. Oh, this is meaningful because remember I was looking for checkout stuff. And here's the culprit. It's showing me that I deployed, or someone deployed, version 1.14.dev. So if this is a production environment, this is pretty bad, right? Because we deployed development code into that production environment. So let me backtrack here a little bit. What I'm showing you is I went into the logs, I identified through the logs some relevant issue, in this case that we had deployed development code into our production environment, which was causing which had the wrong SSL certificate, which was causing all those certificate errors, which was causing, if I backtrack now into my metrics, which was causing my CPU to spike on those machines, which was causing the bookings to fail, and eventually that's what triggered the alert. So I just showed you how I went from an alert, dive into the metrics, identify the what is going on, dive into the logs, and identify the why something is going on. Now, if this is something that I identified and I don't ever want it to happen again, I can do a couple of things. I just want to close a circle in here. I can go back into my dashboard, my original dashboard. If you remember, this is where I came from, and I can create a new panel. I'm going to show it here on the bottom right-hand side. I can create a new panel that shows me the deployed versions. And this is a demo environment, so of course you see dev, 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 dev all the way down. But you can imagine that this would say prod, 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 and if I ever see something that says dev, I should be alerted of that and take action. Or better yet, I should create an alert that shows me if I ever see anything that says dev to alert me, so that I don't have these kinds of issues in the future. All right, so what I just did is I walked you through a demo of how you would monitor and troubleshoot. By the way, feel free to ask questions as we go. I try to keep an eye on the questions panel. So if you have any questions, by all means, just send it through the chat, or we will have time for Q&A at the end as well. So either of those would help. But any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to stop and solve those questions. All right, so I did say I was not going to talk too much of point number one in here, but there's a couple of very small things I'm going to show. First one is you can send us any kind of data, whether it's structured data or unstructured data, we don't care. You can send Sumo a book if you want, and Sumo can grab that book and it can index it. This graphic here is showing you some examples of cloud-to-cloud integration. So for example, you could be sending us data from AWS, from an S3 bucket over to Sumo, or perhaps you're doing cloud-to-cloud log collection from Akamai, like CDF and WF services, as shown in here. Or maybe you're doing SaaS and PaaS platform collection. So Google Apps or Office 365, we have an API that we can send data over to Sumo. We even have some customers that are doing HTTPS posts directly from some clients, like some mobile clients, over to Sumo itself. If you are not necessarily on the cloud just yet, but you actually have servers, there's two ways that you can send data over to us. One is you can install a collector in each one of those machines. Sumo can grab that data and forward it on to the service, to Sumo Logic service, to the cloud. Or if those machines, say, don't have outbound access, we also have the ability to have a central collector. Like in this case, we have a central Sumo Logic collector, and then you can SSH data or WMI data over to that collector and onto Sumo Logic. And by the way, the same thing happens with firewalls, network devices, routers, and so on. You can syslog that data over to a central collector and then onto to the Sumo cloud itself. So, long story short, we can collect data from just about anywhere and that you can send us. The last thing I'm going to talk about data collection, and when we cover this deeper in future webinars, but every single message that comes into Sumo gets tagged with at least these 5 metadata tags: the name of the collector that it came from, the host that the data came from, the source name, which is the name and the path of the log file itself, whether the source itself, whether it's, let's say, Apache data access data or Apache access or Apache error data for example. And then there's something called source category. And this is very important because it can be anything that you want. So we have best practices around it. And you'll see it in a little bit when I start showing you my environment of how we can configure that data itself, right? So, all right, let's start talking about you just getting started with Sumo. So one of the first things is, well, how do I navigate? How do I make my way around Sumo in here? So let me switch over to a training environment. And by the way, this environment that I'm going to pull up right now is the same exact environment that you have access to when you try those labs. We give you a login and a user, and you're able to get into this same exact environment. So the labs that I'll be doing here today, you have access to the same labs as well. All right. So this is pretty straightforward. Left-hand side is your navigation bar. You have a couple of tabs in here. Your home tab shows you things like your most recent recommended dashboards. You have a learn tab that has a lot of resources, including documentation, community, get more training, some videos to get you started, some of the tutorials that I was talking about. And you have that certification tab to take on the certifications when you're ready to do so. You also have this library tab, which shows you everything that you have created and stored, as well as anything that someone has decided to share with you. By the way, this is a training environment, and there's a lot of there's an exercise for people to create an Apache folder and share it. That's why you see a lot of Apache data on that folder itself. But one of the things that you can do here is you can also launch from here a new search query, a new log search, a metric query, or LiveTail, which I'll be talking about in just a second. But let's first show you how you can find what data is available to you. And there's two options to it. There's the official one, which is you go and explore your collectors. Let me show you exactly how to do that. So to do that, you go here under Manage Data, and you go into Collections, and you'll be able to see all the collectors that are available in here. So let's say that we were looking for, I don't know, AWS, let's say CloudTrail data. So I can enter here CloudTrail, and it's going to bring back any collectors and the sources that have CloudTrail. So if you notice here is Labs AWS. My collector is called Labs AWS, and within that collector, I have a lot of data coming in. I have CloudFront data, CloudTrail, config, and you get the point. I have quite a few different things coming in, S3, Lambda, Guard Duty, VPC. And by the way, it's showing me the status of that collector. But even better, it's showing me the source category for that collector. So remember I was talking about looking for CloudTrail? If I click on this little icon in here, it's going to open a query using this metadata. So let's try exactly that. I'm going to click here, and it just launches a new, oh, it did it for a specific collector. Let me just clean this up to show you what I meant. Exactly what it did is it went and did a query saying where source category equals labs AWS CloudTrail. And now I'm pulling all the data that has anything to do with CloudTrail for the last 15 minutes. If I wanted all my AWS data for the last 15 minutes, guess what? I could do something like this. I could say labs AWS star, and that's pulling not just CloudTrail, but CloudFront, Guard Duty, ELB, and any AWS data that I want in there. I think you get the point. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so one way that you can do that, let's say that my boss asked me to go analyze my Apache web servers, go find out how they're operating, if we're getting a lot of client errors, and I got a lot of errors out there. So what I would do is I would enter Apache in here, and I would go search and see if I have any Apache data that is coming into Sumo. And fortunately, I do. If you notice here, Apache, Lab Apache Access, again, I can launch that query by clicking on this little icon. And let me clean this up a little bit again. And as you see here, I'm getting a query for my Lab Apache Access data in there, right? Pretty straightforward. So this is good news. I do have Apache data. So the good thing is that as far as my boss is concerned, let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. I'm going to just enlarge the screen. There we go. So the good news is that I do have Apache data, and I can start now figuring out how to search that data. Before I do, let me show you the second method of finding out what kind of data exists. I'm going to run this very simple query, and the query says something like this. It says, give me everything, and for everything that you give me, now go and count it by source category. If you remember, source category is the metadata. Oops, source category. Source category is the metadata that we tag everything with. And I'm just going to look for data for the last 5 minutes. And it's going to go and run this query and come back and give me a good count of what data is out there. So it looks like I have Labs Graphite, Labs Apache Access, Linux Security, StatsD, and so on. So this is just a cheeky way to run a simple query and find out what kind of data I have out there. Unfortunately for me, there's a lot of Lab Apache Access data because my boss just asked me to go and find that data out there. By the way, you notice that I put this thing in a different line just to clean it up. You do that by doing an Alt-Enter, and that's going to allow you to just bring this down to the next line before you actually run the query. Okay, so there is Apache data in my instance. Now I have to go and start analyzing that data. How do I do that, right? So if you notice, there's a 404 in here. There's a 200. There's another 404. So some of the things I would want to know is, what's my count of 404s? How many 404s have I had out there, right? Well, if you are like me, you probably don't want to start from scratch. The first thing you would do is you would find out if someone else already did that work, because if they did, there's no point in recreating it. So I'm going to show you. The first thing is go find out if someone has already shared content. Has someone created this and shared some content with you? So let me show you how to find shared content within Sumo. And this screen is showing you exactly that. But what you're going to do is you're going to go into your library, and then you're going to search for shared content in here. So let me show you how to do that in here. I'm going to go into my library. And once I'm in my library, I'm going to go here, and I can say I want to see anything that has been shared with me in here. Or even if I didn't want to say everything shared, I could just type Apache, for example, and it's going to come back with anything that is out there, whether I created it or it's been shared with me, that has the word Apache in it. And check it out. Well, there's a lot of these. Again, this is because it's a training instance, but it looks like people have created a lot of stuff out there, and that they've shared with me. So no point in me recreating the wheel. As a matter of fact, I'm going to open one of these web server operations because it sounds very similar to what my boss is asking me. Go find out how our web servers are doing. So I'm going to click on any of these that have already been shared with me. And this one doesn't have any data, so whomever installed it probably didn't do a good job. Let's go find out. I'll show you in a little bit how to install it properly. But let's just go open some other ones. So let's take this one here. I hope it's not the same one I clicked on before. All right, no, here we go. So look at this one. Again, without me doing any work, I just went and I found out stuff that already was out there. So this is showing me the top 10 bots observed. This is awesome. I actually now know what are the bots that are hitting my site. I can see client locations, so that are having 400s. If I expand this, this is 400 errors by client location. So it looks like most of them are coming from the Northeast. I have a few others that are coming from different locations. I can see server errors over time, my 500s and my 503s, non-200 responses, and you get the point. Top 5 clients causing errors. Here's top server errors from error logs. There is no data because I don't have any errors on that. But what you're seeing is a good spread of my information. And again, I had to do nothing. This is just out of the box content. But here's the best part of this is that I actually can use any of these to learn even more. So let's take these server error over time. What if I wanted client errors over time? Here's what I can do. Remember how I can go to any query behind this. So I'm going to go to the query behind this panel, which looks like this. Don't be scared. By the end of today, you will actually know how to read this stuff. But I'm going to keep it simple for now. Let's forget all this nonsense. Without me knowing how much to create, much about the syntax, instead of looking for 500s, as it's shown here, I'm going to look for 400s because I want to see client errors. So instead of saying where status matches 5-star, I'm going to say where status matches 4-star. And I'm going to get rid of these so it doesn't look for just 500s. And let's run this query again. So again, I haven't done any learning of the syntax. I haven't really created anything myself. All I've done is I've taken something that existed, ran that query, and let's say that I want to run it for the last 3 hours, right? So I can change the time frame in here. And as you saw before, there it is. Now I have my 401s, my 404s, my 403s, and as easy as that, I was able to create my content in here. Let's say that this is something that I want. Sumo is smart enough to know that I just came from a dashboard, so it gives me two options. I can either update that dashboard that I came from, I can add it to a new dashboard, or if I simply just want to save it as my own personal query, I could do that. I can click on Save As. I can then rename this to Client Errors Over Time, and let's say, I think I said 3-hour period or time range, right? Because this is what I created. I can put some sort of description if I wanted to in there. I can say, you know, the time range that I had, where I want to store it. So I'm just going to put it in my personal folder in here under personal folder and click on save. So there you go. As simple as that, I now have a good sense of the spread of my 404s just by repurposing something that was out there. Let me take a pause here and show you where this got saved. So in my case, if I go back to my folders, I go into the library itself, and I go into my personal folder, you'll notice that I now have a new query called Client Errors Over Time. It was saved today at 8:48. I can do a couple of things. I can edit it. I can star it. If I click on favorites, what happens is, let me just open my left navigation bar here. I have my recent ones. I have my favorites. So now it's part of my favorites. Somewhere in here, Client Errors Over Time, I have that as a favorite one. I can see the stuff in my personal folder, and I can see everything that has been shared with me, which is this over here. So let's go back to my query. I'm going to unstar it here for just a second. I can share it. And this is what I would like to invite you guys all to do. You notice how I found this because someone had shared it. So if you create any content, share it. It's most likely that someone else wants to use that same content. To share something, you can click on it, and you'll notice, let's see who has access to it. So right now, only I have access to it because I just created it, but I can change that. I can share this with my entire organization. Perhaps I just want to share it with someone in particular. Maybe I want to share it with Stacy. I can choose Stacy, and I can say whether Stacy has view access to it, edit access to it, meaning that she can also change the content, or manage access to it, meaning that she can delete it, she can move it, she can do some other stuff with it as well. I could have even said, I want my entire organization to have view access to it, but I only want Stacy to have manage access to it, right? So let me go here. And in this case, there we go. So this would say everybody is going to get view, but only Stacy is going to get edit access to it. And then I could share this with those folks. All right. Good. So remember, sharing is caring. Any content that you create, you most likely want to start sharing because others are going to take advantage of it. So let me come back to that app. So this app or this dashboard here is a dashboard that I borrowed from someone, and I did not have to do much to be able to take advantage of that, which was great. And I even created my own query off of that. So the other way, that let's say that nobody had any shared content out there. I was trying to do my Apache app access logs, and there is no content that anybody had shared. So the next thing that you would look at is look for the Sumo Logic apps. And this is very key, everyone. So if there's anything that you should take from today is the fact that we have this app catalog with a lot of content that is already existing and out of the box. Let me show you. I'm going to go back into my instance. Let me just close some of these things in here. Open the left nav, and one of the things that I have here is the app catalog. And the app catalog has a whole bunch of apps that are out of the box content. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients, and we've seen them use, for example, Auth0 or Azure SQL or Cisco ASA data or Box data. And so what we've done is we've we've learned from all these different users, and we've created the best dashboards and the best queries that we see you guys looking, so that you don't have to start from scratch. So in my case, I'm looking for Apache. Let me just go type Apache. There it is. Here's the Apache one, and I can even preview the dashboards. I can see what kind of dashboards are going to get installed by this app. Let's say that I do want that stuff. So I'm going to say add to library, and I can give it a name. So I'm going to say Apache Mario, just to distinguish it from other folders called Apache. And here's where the key thing comes. It says, okay, I'm going to give you a lot of content, but how do I tie it to your data? Tell me what your data is. And fortunately for us, we know that our Apache data is called labs Apache access. There it is. So I'm going to search. This is how I tie the data to those dashboards. I click add to library. By the way, I could choose to put it in some other folder, but I'm just going to keep it in my personal folder. Click on add to library. And as you can expect, it's now going to install my this app into my folders here. So notice in library, under my personal folder, there's a new folder called Apache Mario, and it installed all these queries for me. Check it out. Time taken to serve requests, server starts and stops, robots, top clients, top browsers, top 404 refers. These are all queries that we know you as an ops person probably will want to look at when you're looking at your web servers. And it even installed a few dashboards for me here, shown in green. So let's look at this one, Apache Overview. Let me make the real estate a little bit better. And look, without me looking at any queries or anything, I now have a good sense of what's going on with my Apache web server. So visitor locations, traffic distribution by server, traffic volume and bytes served, responses over time, so my successes, client errors. Let's take a peek at another one in here. I'm going to go back to that folder and open Traffic Insights. So let's take a peek at Traffic Insights. Look at this. Top refers, top documents, media served, top 10 search terms. So you get the point. I have a really good sense of what is going on with my web servers without even me having to create anything. We haven't even learned syntax just yet. I've just shown you how you can start taking advantage of a lot of this stuff. And remember, every single one of these panels has a query behind it. So if I want to find out how this map was done, because it's awesome and I want to focus just on, I don't know, on the UK or on the US, I can click on this little icon. It takes me to the query behind it. And let's say that I only care to see data for the United States in here, right? So you notice that I'm using a lookup to find latitude, longitude, country code, country name, region, and all that good stuff. By the way, this is the map view of this data. But what if I looked at the table view of this data? It looks like this. So if I only wanted a specific country code, I could do that. I could, let's say that I only cared for France. So what I can do here is, after I do my lookup, I'm going to do an Alt-Enter, put in a new pipe, and say where country code equals France, right? And that should only show me those results that have a country code of France. And similarly, seems like there's only one result. But if I look at the map now, the map should now center on France only, as you would expect it as well. Right. So notice that without knowing the syntax, you were able to follow my example of the where clauses, because the syntax is very similar to SQL, right? It's a whole bunch of operators separated by pipes in here. Okay, so let's go back to this. So what I've shown you is a couple of ways. One is if you go and see if there's any shared content. Go and see if someone's already shared content. If they haven't, go and see if there's an app for what you want to do. But let's say that we don't have any of those. Let's say that it's your own custom app, it's your own custom logs. So clearly there's no apps for it, because we wouldn't know your custom data. How do you go about troubleshoot? How do you go about analyzing your data? By the way, this is where we normally would stop. We'd let you complete the part 1 of the lab itself. We won't do it here. You can try this later on your own. But let's go into the query syntax itself. In the syntax, as I said before, it's a whole bunch of operators or keywords that are separated by pipes. So you notice here I put my metadata. So about 95% of the time you want to search using metadata, right? So I'm using my metadata and I'm using my keywords to narrow down what I'm searching. And then the results of that are piped to the next operator. In this case, I'm parsing. I'm parsing some of the values in here. Then I'm filtering a little bit more of that. And then once I have those values, I can aggregate those values, and then I can format them so that I can display them in a particular way. So let me walk you through this. But instead of you doing it through slides, let me just do it through the UI itself. So let's take that same example of us trying to let me close these here, and let's take the same example of the Apache data, since most people are familiar with Apache data. I'm going to go to New, create a new search, right? So how do I start searching my Apache data? Use one of the metadata tags, in this case, source category, and I'm going to look for labs Apache Access. There we go. So it's as simple as that. Here's my first query. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Ooh, that might be a little too big. So I'm just going to keep it down to this so that you guys can see it. Okay, so 95% of the time you want to use metadata tags in it. Let's say that we're looking for this stuff, but that had the word Mozilla in it. So I can do this kind of stuff. By the way, I could have put it in quotes if I wanted to. If it has no spaces, there's no need for quotes. If it has spaces, then you would want to put quotes in it. I could have done something like Mozilla star as well, and that would be Mozilla, Mozilla, Moziller, Mozilling, and whatever you else you want to in there. The and is implicit, so I could have done this as well. But if what I was looking was for an or, then that's explicit, and I would have had to type the or in there as well. So now this is giving me anything that is out there that is either Lab Apache Access or anything I don't care about the source category, but that has the word Mozilla in it as well. Right? Not that interesting, so I'm going to bring it back to this. Let's talk a little bit about this in here. This is my time range. I can choose last 15 minutes, last 3 hours, and you get the point. If there's something that is not in here, you can always create it. So minus 45 minutes is not in here. Well, you can do that by just doing minus 45M. What if I wanted 15 minutes worth of data with a 30-minute offset? That's 15 minutes worth of data, starting 45 minutes ago and ending 30 minutes ago. Right? So you can do that as well. Or if you want to look for times like this, custom time range, September 2 all the way to September 7, and I want to start at 2 a.m., I hit apply, and that's the value that I'm going to go here and go search for that. But let's keep it simple for now. Let's just do relative. I'm going to say last 60 minutes, and there's my data in here. All right, so this is good so far. I now know how to search for that data, but what I really want to do is I want to start analyzing that data. I want to see if I get a lot of 400s, a lot of 500s, a lot of that kind of stuff, right? So the best thing that you can do for yourself is parse your data. Fortunately for us, parsing will be easy here, and by parsing I mean extracting fields. So if you notice, from this message that I'm highlighting in here, I've actually extracted the date. I've pulled out the date, and it's parsed out here. So how do I extract other fields? Well, I'm going to show you the simple way. Since Apache data happens to be very well structured, I can get away with this. I'm going to highlight a message and use that message as an example. I'm going to say, parse this selected text. So I'm going to tell it, anything you find between the word get and the word HTTP, I want to extract that, and I want to call that the URL. Now look for a space, and then whatever value between two spaces, I want to extract that and use that as my status code. And then anything after that is going to be my size, and you get the point. All I'm doing is I'm extracting values, and I'm assigning them names. I'm setting up variables, if you will. So this will be my refer, and this one here, let's call this the user agent here, right? So as simple as that, I used the message that already existed to create some fields out of it, click submit, and what you notice is This just creates that query for me. I could have typed it myself, but it was just nice and easy to do it this way. And if I run this query now, what you'll notice is I actually have my message still here on the right-hand side, but it's parsed out a lot of the fields. There's user agent, there is URL, status code, size, refer. So these fields have been parsed out for me, which is great because now I can do something like count by status code. Right? And this shows me now that most of my status codes are 200s. That's a good thing because that's what I was expecting. But I see a lot of 404s here as well. But you're getting the point. I'm starting to show you how you can start parsing that data so that you can make sense out of it. Before I go too far with all this, the summary, the counting, and all that stuff, let's talk a little bit more about this parsing. So I showed you the simple way of parsing. Let me show you other ones. I'm going to go back here. Actually, here, I'm going to go to the Learn tab, and from there, I'm going to kick off the documentation because I want to show you some other operators that you have available from a parsing perspective. The one that I've shown you is called anchor parsing, and the reason for that is because we use the word get as an anchor. And it's a predictable pattern. We all know what Apache logs look like. But what if you don't? What if you have variable patterns like this one's? So in that case, you can use regex. And if I were to ask for a show of hands, I bet you that most of you have used regex before. So I'm not going to walk you through how to use regex. I'm just going to use an example here. I'm going to grab this one, and let's just go drop it in our query itself. And for those of you who haven't used parse regex before, here's a very, very brief explanation. What this is saying is, look for this pattern. This says 1 to 3 digits followed by a period, 1 to 3 digits followed by a period, 1 to 3 digits followed by a period, 1 to 3 digits. That sounds like an IP address, doesn't it? So all that it's saying is, look for that pattern. And if you find that pattern, store it in a field called IP address. And now guess what? That field has been parsed out for me. So this is great because look at this. I could do things like, I don't know, average size by IP address. So I'm now calculating the average size I'm getting of my messages by IP address. So I'm showing you a few things here. First is I'm showing you that you could have multiple parse statements in a message. Second, they don't all have to be the same. This is parse anchor, this is parse regex. And third, the resulting fields, you can mix and match them. It doesn't matter if they come from one parse statement or the other, you can just go ahead and parse those. So before I stray too far away from parsing, a couple of other things I want to show you. There's many, many other parsing benefits here. If you're sending us JSON formatted logs, guess what? We know how to parse those. If you're sending us key value formatted logs, meaning name equals Mario, company equals Sumo Logic, we know how to parse that. CSV, if you're using some other delimiter like tab or colon, you can use the split operator, XML. So in short, we want to help you with parsing that kind of stuff, and we'll parse it that way. Normally, right around here, we get a question saying, well, this is great, but I don't want to be writing these parse statements every single time I want to look at my Apache Access data. So the answer is great. We don't want you to be doing it either. What you want to do is you want to build a field extraction rule. So here's point number 2 I want you to take from today's session. So point number 1 was, remember that we have apps, so don't start from scratch. But point number 2 is, look at field extraction rules and create them, because let me show you something. Let me show you what a field extraction rule is first. If I go in here and go under Manage Data Settings, one of the things I can do is I can create field extraction rules. And these mean that, let me just grab one here that was created recently. Let's grab this one and click on Edit. This rule is saying, listen, I'm going to create a rule called the Apache Access Rule that says anything that comes into Sumo that has source category equals something Apache Access. So this is prod Apache Access, labs Apache Access, dev Apache Access, whatever that it comes in, I want you to apply the following parsing expression. And what this is doing is it's parsing my data as it's being ingested into Sumo. As the data is coming in, it's parsing all those fields so that I don't have to do them anymore. So because this rule exists, check this out. I'm going to go back to my query. I'm going to get rid of these parsing statements. And this, well, let's do, yeah, and this will work. And the reason it works is because someone already did the parsing for me. That field extraction rule is already doing the parsing for me, and those fields are available. So one of the questions I get is, well, how do we know which fields are available? Well, there's two ways. One is you could go back here in settings, and you can look at the parsing rule and see what are the fields that are being parsed. Or similarly, you can just run a simple query. Like I'm just going to run this source category lab Apache Mozilla. And one of the places I didn't talk about was this left-hand side here. This is the field browser. And this is showing me all the different fields that are available to me, right? Status code, source IP, size, method. These are all the fields that got parsed out of there. So I could do something like count by, and let's just take URL, which is now a field that has been parsed. I can do a count by URL and see how those URLs counts look like in there. All right, I don't see any questions, so let me continue here. What I've shown you is starting to use some of this parsing, starting to use some of these syntax. I show you that you can use metadata and keywords. I show you that you can start parsing, whether you use parse anchor, parse JSON, key value, regex, and whatnot. You want to then start filtering your data. So the simple one I showed you before was the where clause, right? But you have others like the in operator. If status code in one of these, then do something, otherwise do something else. And there's quite a few other filtering operators. Unfortunately, I can't show you all the dozens and dozens of operators we have. So I'm going to focus on the ones that are a little more meaningful. Let me continue with this example in here. Let's say that I wanted to count by status code, as I mentioned before, right? But now here's the challenge. It's showing me that I have about 6,000 404s. But what I don't know is, are these 404s happening all at the same time, or are these 404s happening spread across my 60 minutes worth of data? So I'm going to show you a new operator that is pretty interesting, pretty meaningful. My new operator is called time slice. And as the name suggests, it's going to slice my 60 minutes into buckets. I could do, let's say, 5-minute buckets. In that case, I'm going to have 12 time slices, right? And now I'm going to count my data by status code, but also by time slice. Oops, by time slice, as you see here. And you notice that I put a little underscore in here. The reason for that is because the result of any field, so if you notice I was doing a count of status code before, the result is an underscore count. So now that I'm doing a time slice, the result will be an underscore time slice. So let's look at that. Here's my query. Oops, did I write something? No, processing something before. Let's just run this query. All right, so here it is. I run it, and now I can see that at 540, I had 400, for status code 401, I had these many counts. And at this other time slice, for this status code, I had this many counts. That's great, but it's all still a little bit hard to read. So I'm going to show you a new operator called transpose. And just like Excel, what it allows you to do is take a list and switch it into a table. So I'm going to show you how I can take this row and change it into this here. So I can specify what my rows and my columns are, and this is a lot easier to read. So now I can see trends over time, right? At 510, 515, 520, 525, I can see that my 404s are spread across evenly through that. But we're no machines. An easier way to see it would be to start plotting this kind of stuff and start seeing trends over time in here, even pie charts if I wanted to there as well. Right? Let's say that I didn't want to show 304s, I didn't want to show 200s because those seem to be taking over my graph. I can hide them from here, or let me show you something. I could do, I'm going to show you the bad way and I'm going to show you the good way. I could do something like where status, actually let's open this status code equals 200 or status code equals 304. By the way, I could have used the in operator where status code in 200 comma 304. Since I don't want these, I can say where not, right? So these ones are going to remove those values from here. But I'm going to show you a better way of doing this. Remember, this filters out some messages, passes them on to this one, and then on to the next one, and then on to the next line. So a better way would have just been to do this. The more you remove from the top line, at the top line, the better, because that means I'm filtering out my messages and I'm passing less messages onto the next one and the next one. And the reason I can do this is because I have my field extraction rules. Therefore, status code is already a field that exists. I don't have to parse first and then use status code. I'm going to show you one last thing here from a formatting perspective. So I formatted this with a transpose, but let's say that you want to put this graph and you're worried about your 404s. Every single graph in here has settings. I'm just going to use one simple one here. I'm going to change my 404s into a line chart so that I can effectively create a line combo chart. And now I can visually see how my 404s, I can easily see how my 404s compare to the rest of my status codes in here. All right, so what I've shown you is this syntax, how to go about filtering, how to go about aggregating, how to go about formatting as well using transpose. Unfortunately, I can't go through all of these, but some of the labs will make you go through some of this stuff. Some advanced operators. For those of you joining us on Thursday, we're going to run through more of these advanced analytics. Hopefully, most of you will join. Things like log compare, which you saw me use in my demo, log reduce, I'm sorry, or even log compare. But for now, I want to show you one other tool called Livetail. And what Livetail allows you to do is it allows you, as the name suggests, it allows you to tell your logs. So if you are a developer, this is great news because historically you haven't had access to your production environment, right? And now all of a sudden here through Sumo, you actually can tail the logs in the web servers to see if any of the code that you put out there is actually causing any issues. The even better thing is that you're not having to jump into one box to look at those logs and then the next one and then the next one. I can say, give me from all boxes anything that has this source category. Maybe I can say, and only bring those that have the word Mozilla in it. And by the way, I want you to highlight the 404s. I want to highlight the word error. I want to highlight the word Mozilla in it as well, right? So what you're doing is you're tailing your logs and you're helping yourself to identify what's going on right now. If you find that some trend that you want to look further into, of course, you can always go back and start using this kind of functionality that I was showing you before. By the way, there is a command line interface for Livetail, so you can download a client and do this kind of tailing from your desktop as well, if you wanted to. Okay, so I've shown you quite a bit today. I've shown you how to start doing the simple analytics. I've shown you how to use this Livetail. There's some labs here that I would encourage you guys to try on when you're on your own as well. But let's switch gears here for a second and let's talk a little bit about how you can start monitoring your data. So how can you create those dashboards? So a dashboard, as I showed you before, is really just a collection of panels. So each panel here makes up a dashboard itself. You have the ability to do drill downs. You have the ability to set those dashboards in live mode, meaning you want the data to stream live into those so you can put them up in your operations center. You can set up filters as well. So let me just show you how to do a lot of this stuff. We're going to go back to our simple query that we had. And guess what? To create a dashboard, it's incredibly simple because all you have to do is click on this Add to Dashboard box here button. When I click on that, I have the ability to give my panel a new name. Let's say Apache status codes, right? It's there already. And I can choose a dashboard that already exists, or to keep it simple for today, I'm going to, let's just call it Apache dashboard. Actually, let's use my name so that it's easy to find. Mario Apache dashboard, and it says, okay, I don't recognize that name, so I'm going to create a new dashboard. Is that all right? And you can say, yep, I'm going to create a new dashboard, put it in my personal folder, click on add, and as you would expect, it's just going to create a brand new dashboard with just one thing in here. So it's as simple as that. Let's say that I want to add a new panel into it. How do you do that? Well, you go and create a second search. I'm going to cheat here for a second. I'm just going to go into my, oh, let's do this. Let's open that client errors over time. Remember this one that we created before? I'm going to run that query. and I'm going to get all the 400s, if you remember. Yeah, this is the one. Let's just add this to my dashboard. So I'm going to click on Add to Dashboard. I'm going to add it to my existing Mario dashboard. And there you go, Mario Apache, click on Add. And again, as simple as that, I just created a second panel into my dashboard, which I can move around, reshape, reformat, and do whatever I want with it. Let me show you a little bit of the things that I can do in here. So I can toggle the theme. If I wanted my dashboard to be in dark, I can do that as well. I can add non-data panels, meaning I can add a title panel, my first dashboard. I can add a text panel, for example. Let me go back in there and add a text panel in here. There we go. So let's do this. These are pretty important because a lot of times you are the one creating your dashboard, but it could be someone else who's reading this dashboard, right? You might not understand what I'm typing because that's in Spanish, so don't worry about it. I'm going to add a link in here to other dashboards if I wanted to. Let's say that I wanted to suggest this other dashboard as well. And I can click submit, and there you go. I just created some text in here. So I can move this stuff around. I can put my title up at the top. I can perhaps put this stuff in here. Oops, I just made this large. Anyway, you get the point for what I'm doing. I can move this stuff around. Maybe I want to have this one here, and I want to make it a little bit smaller and move things around. And you get the point. You see that in less than 5 minutes, I was able to create a very simple dashboard according to the kind of data that I want to put out there as well. Yeah. All right. I don't see any questions, so let me continue with this. The mechanics for creating the dashboard are pretty simple. There's a few other things that you can do. You can delete it, start it, full screen, data access. That means normally you get to see your dashboard with your own viewers' data access. But I can say, you know what? I actually want people to see this dashboard with my level of data, meaning if they didn't have access to production environment, but I do, I want them to be able to see that data with that production data access itself. Other things that I can do in here, I can share it. And of course, I will say always, always share. Right now, this dashboard is only myself, but you remember how I was showing you before that you can share this dashboard with your entire organization. Even better with dashboards, you can actually share a link. You can grab this link and share it with people and they would get to see it. So who gets to see this dashboard? Well, there's a couple of things you can own here. You can even make this dashboard accessible outside of your organization. Let's say that you want to share some data with your VP, but your VP doesn't have access to Sumo Logic. Well, you can toggle this on and you make this dashboard shareable to those who don't have a login. And now you can share it with the entire world. Maybe not the smartest thing, or you can whitelist some IP addresses, and then you can share that dashboard with only those whitelisted IP addresses as well. So again, sharing is caring. Make sure that you try some of that stuff. And then I can also set up filters. So if I want this dashboard to be used by several people, by several groups, let's say, I can set up here filters for any of these different fields in here. Let's just grab, I don't know, I'm going to choose status code for lack of a better example. But in here, you could go in there and just enter the status code that you care for, and then all your dashboards will get reset to just only show you that particular status code. Not the best example, but you get the point of how you can use filters to set up your dashboards in there. Last thing, if you say done editing, one of the things that you have here is the ability to set up live mode. If you are going to be displaying this dashboard in an operations center, then you want to set it to live mode so people can take advantage of that. Okay, I'm going to hurry up here a little bit because the next thing I want to show you is, again, this is where we stop for people to take on labs. I'm going to show you alerts. Alerts are pretty easy to create. On Thursday's session, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to create meaningful alerts. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to build a very simple alert because it's extremely easy to do so. Let's go back into our query in here. Let's just keep this simple. Let's go to this query in here. Let's say that I only cared for those that were status code 404. and status code 404. Oops, sorry. Status code 404. And here is my query. I don't even need to transpose and time slice it. Let me just do this, go back to the table view. And here's a case where it's showing me my counts of my 404 status codes. As a matter of fact, since they're all 404s, I don't even need to do this, right? I can just count by the time slice. And now I know what the count happens to be. Let's say that I want to alert anytime I have more than 600 404s in a given 5-minute period. So what I can do is I can put a little where clause where count is greater than 600. And if I ever have anything that is greater than 600, I'm going to get some results. If I don't have anything greater than 600, or let's say 650, I'm going to get no results in my query here. So to schedule an alert, it's pretty easy. First, you save your query. And as part of saving the query, you have the ability to schedule it. By default, it's set to run never. But if you schedule it, you can say, I want it to run, let's say, on an hourly basis. You could even set a custom cron job, a custom cron to specify when you want it to run. But let's keep it simple. We're going to run every hour. Go and grab last 60 minutes worth of data. And by the way, don't send me a notification every time the search is complete. Only send it if the following condition is met. So if my number of results happens to be 0, I do not want to be alerted, because that means that I had nothing greater than 650. But if my results are greater than 0, meaning if I do have results, then yes, I want you to send me an alert. And in this case, we'll keep it simple. I can do an email. I can specify what the subject is. I can specify who I want to send the email to. And I can specify if I'm including the query, the results, a histogram, and all that good stuff. So creating the alerts is pretty easy. Next time, I'm going to talk a little bit about creating meaningful alerts. I'm also going to talk a little bit about all these other options of creating webhooks, saving to index, and whatnot. But the mechanics of creating alerts are incredibly simple to be able to send alerts. And here is an example of the kind of email that you would get with creating these alerts as well. All right, so again, I would encourage you to try these labs. There's parts 1 through 7 for you to try. It's gonna cement a lot of the knowledge that we've learned in here. I'm gonna briefly talk about metrics. I've spent most of the time talking about logs, but just keep in mind that as I showed you on the demo, metrics allow you to have an overlay. You're able to overlay your metrics with your logs, because your metrics talk about the what, your logs talk about the why something is happening. And where can we get metrics from? There's 3 main sources, actually 4 as of last week. I'll talk about the 4th one in just a second, but your host metrics. If you have a server out there, you can grab those host metrics and bring them into Sumo and start analyzing. AWS. So AWS happens to send all its metrics into CloudWatch. So guess what? Sumo can go into CloudWatch, grab all those metrics, and bring them into Sumo so you can analyze them. Or if you have metrics that are any Graphite compatible, so Graphite formatted metrics, let's say drop wizard, collect D, stats D, we can grab those metrics and bring them in. By the way, I'll share the slides for this webinar as well, so you can view these links here on how to set them up so that you can do this. The 4th one that I mentioned is we just released the ability, or it's in beta, I should say, the ability to create metrics out of your logs. So your logs themselves can have a number, and they can have what I consider dimensions or metadata tags, and we can create metrics out of those logs as well. So that's the 4th one, which is in beta now. And then, of course, your dashboards can have both. If you remember, here is a dashboard that has metrics at the top and logs here. So your panels can be mixed panels of logs and metrics out there. All right. So where do you go from here? There's a lot of stuff for you to learn. If you remember, that Learn tab has a lot of QuickStart videos to get you started. Equally important is the ability to start exploring some of the documentation. You can explore what's new out there. You can check out community, which has a lot of information. Of course, you can get onto additional webinars, or you can open a support case with any of our stuff out there. And don't forget your tutorials. You should try those tutorials. And when you try those tutorials, that is going to prepare you for that level 1 Sumo Pro user exam, which don't forget, you want to be taking that exam from your own instance. Otherwise, some training user is going to get credit for your for your certification exam. So make sure you go on your own instance and take the certification exam from there. So with that, let me pause here. Let me stop the recording and let me pause here for a second and see if there's any questions from the audience.